When we think about history, our minds usually jump to epic battles, brilliant generals, the rise and fall of these huge empires. But what if the most important problem in ancient history, the one thing that could make or break an empire, wasn't about courage or strategy? What if it was just about paying the bills? And that's really the big idea we're digging into today. Because when the money stopped flowing, loyalty just vanished. It turned out the ultimate weapon wasn't the sword or the spear. It was the payroll. That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Before you had central banks or income taxes or government bonds, how on earth did you keep hundreds of thousands of armed men fed, equipped, and loyal, year after year? Well, the way they answered that question literally shaped the entire fabric of civilization. Okay, let's start with the absolute basics here. Soldiers, they don't just fight for some abstract ideal. They fight for something real, something tangible, security for their family, a plot of land, maybe just some cold, hard cash. So the moment armies became these permanent professional institutions, warfare immediately became a permanent financial problem. See, ancient states couldn't just fire up a printing press or run endless deficits like we might today. Their military power had to be anchored in something real. And it pretty much boiled down to one of three things: actual metal dug from the earth, land you took by force, or the forced labor of the people you conquered. This wasn't some abstract economic theory. It determined exactly who bore the crushing burden of empire. And no empire understood this brutal math better or built a more sophisticated system around it than Rome. So let's really dive into how they managed to turn simple metal into overwhelming military might. Just look at that number: 400,000. At its absolute peak, Rome had a professional army of nearly 500,000 men, spread across 3 continents. And this wasn't some weekend militia. It was a permanent standing institution, and every single one of those soldiers expected to get paid. This wasn't an optional extra. It was the non-negotiable price of holding the entire empire together. And this right here, this was the tool that made it all possible: the denarius. But to call the denarius just money is to really miss the point. It was so much more. It was a promise. It was how soldiers got paid, it was how taxes were collected, and it had the emperor's face stamped right on it, a constant reminder of his authority. This little silver coin was the absolute lifeblood of the empire. And this is where we see the real Roman genius at work. They didn't just spend money. They created this incredible self-funding loop of conquest. It worked like this. They'd go conquer a place like Spain, not just for the territory, but because it had rich silver mines. Then they'd dig that silver out, mint it into coins, and use those exact coins to pay the army that kept the empire secure, which in turn allowed them to collect taxes in those very same coins and start the whole cycle all over again. It was a perfect machine of power, money, and violence. But what happens when a key part of that machine breaks down? Geology has its limits. Eventually, the easily accessible silver just started to run dry, and when faced with this massive structural problem, Rome's leaders turned to the oldest financial trick in the book. They just diluted the money. Slowly, almost silently, they started mixing the silver with cheaper metals like copper. And the decay? Well, it was gradual, but it was relentless. In the 1st century, a denarius was almost pure silver. Fast forward to the mid-3rd century, and it was basically just a copper coin with a thin silver wash. The coin looked the same, sure, but its real value was absolutely collapsed. And this, of course, triggered a vicious cycle. The debased coins meant a soldier's pay was suddenly worth a lot less, which led to inflation across the board. As prices went up, the soldiers demanded higher pay, which the state then paid with, you guessed it, even more debased coins. To cover the massive shortfall, taxes skyrocketed, crushing farmers and workers. And the end result? Loyalty shifted away from the state and towards individual generals you could promise them real loot and bonuses. So you see, this wasn't just an economic crisis in the end. It was a crisis of trust. What started as a sneaky fix for a silver shortage became this massive, silent transfer of wealth from the people to the military. It hollowed out the very foundation of the Roman economy and the Roman state itself. But Rome wasn't alone in this, not by a long shot. Every single empire faced this exact same problem. How do we fund the military? They just came up with different and sometimes even more brutal solutions. Let's take a quick look at a few other models they came up with. This table gives us a really great snapshot. Take the Assyrians. They basically made war pay for itself through organized plunder and terror.
The problem was their whole system required constant expansion or it would collapse. Then you have the Han Chinese, who mobilized society itself using forced labor and grain taxes. But that system completely fell apart the second the state's central power started to weaken. And the Aztecs. They funded their whole warrior class with a vast tribute network. Incredibly efficient, but also incredibly vulnerable. If that tribute ever stopped flowing, their entire political structure could just vanish, almost overnight.
So even though all these methods are different, a single unifying truth starts to emerge. Military power is never some abstract concept. It is always paid for with something real, something tangible. And that choice, whether you pay with silver or grain or even human lives, is what ultimately defines the structure and the fate of a civilization. Okay, and this is where history starts to feel, well, uncomfortably familiar. Modern states, they like to think they've solved this whole problem with sophisticated tools like digital budgets and national debt. But have we really? I mean, if you strip away all the modern jargon, are the mechanics of funding state power today really all that different from what Rome or Assyria were doing thousands of years ago? Let's take a closer look. The parallels are just striking. What Rome did with coin debasement, we now call inflation. It's a quiet way to pay for things by making everyone else's money worth less. The tribute networks that funded the Aztec military, well, they've been replaced by national debt, which basically extracts future resources from the population. And those conquered silver mines that fueled the Roman legions, today we have central banks that control the creation of money itself. The names have changed, the tools have gotten more sophisticated, but the fundamental logic hasn't budged. These modern tools still function to fund state power by shifting the real cost onto the general population, onto savers, whose purchasing power just erodes away, and onto wager earners who pay the price through taxes and inflation. And that really leaves us with a final, pretty sobering thought. The most dangerous illusion isn't that history repeats itself. It's the belief that somehow we've transcended it. Empires don't fall because they lose one final battle. They crumble when the systems that finance their power become unsustainable. Because if you don't understand how money flows to power, you won't need history to repeat. It'll just continue. And you'll be left feeling the consequences without ever understanding the cause.